Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of our User Showcase webinar, where here at BrightGauge, we bring you a conversation with one of our partners that we've seen make great strides in how they're using BrightGauge, bringing it either to their teams or their clients. We host these every single month for the most part, and we are always looking for suggestions on what you'd like to see next. So hopefully you'll stick around to the end of this webinar and fill out a little survey letting us know what you'd like to see. But for today, we're really excited to have our guest with us. We're going to go over, as you see here, the power of dashboards in managing client relationships and team performance. And we're really excited. We have a 5-year plus partner with us today, Network People. So for those just joining us for the first time, I'm Danielle Ungerman. I'm the Partner Success Team Lead here at BrightGauge. And from Network People, we're really pleased to host Joe Somerville. Joe, welcome.
Hey guys, thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to be here as well. I know we're all used to watching a lot of videos now with COVID going on. So thanks for diving in with this. I'm having a lot of fun putting this together. Just to give you some quick history, Network People's been using BrightGauge, like Danielle said, for over 5 years now. We brought it in during a Evolve meeting, or what used to be known as HTG meeting. And then we just kind of expanded it as our business needed, to where we've actually now been using it for our client portals, our internal systems, and centralized service. So I'm excited to show you guys some things with that. Obviously, we're also, just so everyone knows, a ConnectWise shop. So we do use manage and automate in tandem with BrightGauge to get the best out of it. I'll hand it back over to Danielle, but we'll get going soon enough, and can't wait.
Great, thanks. So for those just joining us, we always record these sessions. We'll make them available online at brightgauge.com/webinars. We also like to post them to our knowledge base and share them wherever and whenever possible. So check back. The recording should be available to all of those who are here today after attending this session. And for those listening in later on, welcome. We're excited that you are happy to tune back in a little bit later. So yeah, just check out online, wherever. We'll email you. We'll make it as easy as possible. I also want to note at this time too that if you have any questions throughout, just go ahead and pop them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them as we go along. Anything that seems like it's a better fit for the end, we'll save it for the end. But yeah, don't be shy. Anything that you think of that you'd like to ask about, we'll do our best. So a little overview of what's going to take place on this call today. We're going to go over first, with each of these sessions, we like to share a little of what's new in BrightGauge, some of the other events that we have coming up. So we'll give you a brief glimpse into some of our latest releases, some of what we have on deck. And then we'll get into, Joe will start presenting on some of those centralized services dashboards that they've spent a lot of time on over there that they're looking at on a daily basis, client dashboards, and then a collaborative session that we have at the end on some design hacks for all, some little things that you can take back to your team, back to your daily efforts to make BrightGauge and just your overall workflows, processes work a little bit better for you. And if you have any suggestions when we get to that point on things that work for you too, we'd love to see those in the chat. So hopefully we can make today really collaborative. So first up, a little bit of what's new. I won't spend too much time on this, but I'm happy to just keep everyone here informed. We have released not only color themes where you can change a color palette to match across your entire BrightGauge experience, all the gauges that show up either in your reports or dashboards following a set theme, but you also now get more color threshold options to choose from. In addition to that, we've been listening. It's been a lot of requests coming in, but we do have some new sound alerts to choose from. So go on and play with them. Some of them are pretty hilarious. Some of them are scary. Let us know what you think. And all of this can be found in the design section of the Gauge Builder. We also introduce color thresholds based on date. So you can do the same as how you're filtering at the gauge level You can do between, anything before a certain date, after a certain date. This seems to work best when you're looking at it from a list type gauge. So just keep that in mind as you're testing it out. And we also introduced another filtering option for you, not only at the gauge level, but also when you're on your dashboards or reports. We wanted to make it a little bit easier for you to search through your hundreds of gauges that you might have. So this is a great little way to work around figuring out where that information might live. If you know the data set, you can always work from there. And then lastly, a very major one that we recently released back in June, this toggle dashboard filters for viewers. So we recommend this as an internal only feature, but what it allows you to do is to set up different filters across your dashboard. So if you wanted to create one dashboard for the whole entire team, and you want to create a filter for each team member, you would use this. And so it's an apply all across all dashboards set up that user has access to. So just keep that in mind as you're working through testing it out. Now, our upcoming events. So we have one scheduled for the end of this month. Some of you may have already received an invite to our Slack community, ConnectWise Partner Success on Slack. So what we're looking to accomplish here is giving you a space to talk to each other. We've put in the effort over the last year or so to come up with plenty of examples, some of them through the form of this webinar, through our templates that you can find in our support docs. And we want to make a space for you where the conversation is continuous. So enter ConnectWise Partner Success on Slack. We have our first mastermind chat taking place in a couple weeks. And what this is a day-long, global-wide Q&A session with a specific topic. For this first one, we're going to invite back some of our previous speakers during these webinars to go over some of what they've looked at as they've gone through growth. A lot of them have been with Breakage for a while, so this will be a very interesting conversation, not just on what's going on with Breakage, how they've utilized it, but also how they've seen growth in their business and what they're looking at metrics-wise. And in addition to that, we'll go over some resources, some Q&A, and some of you may be able to hear my Slack going off in the background. So if you join, you can pick that fun, annoying little ringtone to play for you too. We hope to see you there. If you follow this link at the bottom here, it'll show you a little bit more on what this community is about, as well as information on the events and just how to get started. So I hope to see you there. It's at this point that I will go ahead and hand things over to Joe and silence my notifications. All right, Joe, take it away.
Why, thank you very much. Let me go ahead and make sure I'm sharing my screen with you guys, and then we'll get going on showing you around. 1 second here. All right. So thank you so much. This is really fun to do. We've really enjoyed Breakage, and we've really enjoyed what it's been able to let us do. So just to give you guys a quick intro, my name is Joe Somerville. I'm our CTO and development director here at Network People. I've been with our company for 10 years now. We've been open since '96, but we've worked with ConnectWise for 9 years. So I was brought on, and one of the first projects I had at Network People was to bring on ConnectWise Manage. And from there, we partnered with them. We were already an Automate shop, but we brought that platform on, and then obviously through HTG or Evolve groups, we were able to grow and do some really cool things. So before I start showing off anything, just want to give a shout out to that team for some of their really good ideas on how to share good information. I really like that we do informational sessions like this so that we can share our ideas. And like we were encouraging earlier, please, if you guys have any cool ideas that even maybe I could be using after all this time of using it, I would love to hear them. So please feel free to share. So one of the first things we're going to do today is really kind of look at the different, I'm sorry, my slide deck is not going. There it goes. The different things that we do in our centralized services. So in our centralized service, we do about 7 checks on a daily basis. So what we have is we have ConnectWise managed template tickets, and then anything that's not able to be automated, we do a manual check for. What's really important in that manual check, obviously, is that we are able to see what the problems are. We're easily able to prioritize those problems and easily able to get them in our system. So this right here is our backup dashboard. It's actually a third of the backup dashboard. We'll be going over some more of these, but I'm just going to walk you through a couple things and why we felt like they were so important, and hopefully give you guys some little design tricks at the same time. So one of the first things you'll notice in our top row is that it doesn't necessarily look like everything's color coded. One of the things we do here at Network People is we make sure that it's only color coded if we want to make a ticket or we're going to prioritize based off of that alerting. So just as a general rule, what we have here is if it's not colored, it's just informational. So one little thing is make sure you're building both informational and alert gauges kind of all in one pane. This will be a great way for you to just be able to see some things. So obviously you guys can tell guys and gals can tell we're a dado shop. I don't know your experience with dados, and we've had a really good experience. We really like the solution, but at times we have had to contact them about getting a device taken out of the system. Just making sure agents look good, making sure nothing's paused. So our top row is basically just showing how many live devices we have in the system, how many agents we have in the system. Are any of those devices hidden? That's one of our policies before we take them out of the system. And then just like paused agents, unprotected volumes, and any outdated OSs. It's something we probably update every week, and it's just a great idea, once again, just to have a good almost inventory of what's in your system. From there to the right, and you'll notice this a lot on our dashboards, is that we will usually have a type, subtype, or a blended type subtype gauge. What we feel like this does is it lets us see at a quick glance, what percentage of problems we're having and how many we have. So if we're having, a crazy day and I start to see the last backup fails over, say, like, 3 to maybe it's 5 tickets, and we've luckily never had that in a single day, but if it was that would be for concern. We once again want to see an equal spread. The other thing I just want to kind of mention at the beginning of this is all of these have drill downs. So there's not one of these that you couldn't click on to get more information. I know we're going to go in that later. And then just to kind of finish up this slide, one of the things that was most important for me is just to look at a few things every single day. Once again, I have a KB built in what we use as IT glue. That KB link is in my ConnectWise ticket. And then I just basically open up my morning and work through my tickets. Backups is my second check of the day. So what I do is I make sure that anything that hasn't checked in 12 hours shows up here. It's great to know that this syncs, but as always, what I do before I look at any of these gauges is I sync the gauge as well. So make sure knowing how to sync the gauge, just in case it's not as up to date as you want it, is something that's familiar to you. Another thing I look up as last backup fails. So if anything's failed throughout the day, we do that for both servers and workstations. Something like a no backup over 24 hours. If you used any backup systems, you know that you could not get a last backup fail because it's in process. But if you have a policy like we do here at Network People where no backup is left, if it's over 24 hours, it's an emergency, it needs to get going right away. This is still nice to be able to have a separate gauge. About 3 years ago, we just ran the last backup fail gauge, and we were missing that over 24 hours fail notification. So constantly be looking at what type of alerting you need to do, and your vendors are always usually good with helping you with that. Lastly, just to finish this one off, overutilized devices, last offsite, you'll notice how those are yellow compared to the orange. That's because they are a lower priority. when we see that ticket, so that my dispatcher, once he gets, let's say there was 7 tickets from today that I would have to make, maybe 8, he's able to clearly see how to prioritize those, and the person that's building the tickets quickly sees what priority. So we obviously use that color matching in ConnectWise. You can put a color on the priority within your SLA. We match that same color to this. We're dashboard fashionistas, I guess we like to joke around about. On top of that, just to finish this one off, like I said, unprotected volumes and paused agents exception list. This is really big for backups, as y'all know. All right, let's look at a different one. This is actually lower down, and this is some other things we're doing. So when we were talking about things we could share to help other people using this at any level, one thing we kept on going back to is making sure you're using informational gauges. So these are gauges that you can launch from your dashboard where you can put any information you want to have on them. This could be something like mini KB. It could also have links. So one thing I like to do is, if anybody that's done checks knows that there's a lot of jumping at times. You might have to check a portal. Even with Bright Gauge, you might want to design a process where you rely on Bright Gauge, but you still go and check a separate portal here and there. That's semi-concurrent with what Network People is doing. So with all of our data alerting, we're getting it into Bright Gauge, but we still want to jump into the cloud to check cloud continuity. We still want to jump in to check shadow control. So here I just have a quick check and a quick link for everybody to go through. You'll notice that even though we do have the link for the shadow control portal, that I'm still bringing in some alerting from there. So once again, if you can bring in alerting, go ahead and do that as much as possible. Another thing we like to do, and you can just barely see it, but this is one of my favorite things I started doing. So a lot of times during onboarding, or just general project work, or just really day-to-day work, you'll have people that need to turn alerts off, right? And we had struggled with, like, well, how do we let the centralized service person know that that alert's turned off, even though they're probably going to see an alert? And what we did was we strategically used the status in the config in ConnectWise Managed. So you'll notice that our status, we entered a new one that says active monitoring turned off. And what that lets us know is that without having a conversation, it lets us our engineers can change to that status. And since I have a gauge here, I just review that every day to see if anything that I might make an alert for might have any problem. Before we did that, a lot of theory that a lot of people were using is that your person doing checks had to be the same person. You had to be very knowledgeable, and you had to keep some of that history in your brain, what's going on, knowing what other departments are doing. I don't know about everybody out there, but I'm just too busy to keep all that in my brain. I can't do it. I need to cheat. So I'm going to use the system to cheat as much as possible to look like I know what I'm doing anytime somebody asks, because I just usually have to go check this gauge. So that's a good little idea. And then exclusions. We're probably going to talk about this a little bit later as well, but exclusions are very important. So anything I'm filtering, and this is different than the monitoring and the status of the configs. This is using that active filtering that we were just talking about, that you're now going and be very careful with giving people options to that. But you can obviously do some filtering. I just suggest you create an actual informational gauge that shows all the filtering that you're constantly updating as you do it. Well, let's check out something other than backups here in centralized service. Here's security. So one of the reasons I wanted to show this dashboard off is I can do almost nothing with Automate and the data sources that are available for some of our tools. So we use Cisco Umbrella, we use Huntress, and we use Cylance. Now we are leveraging some things. You guys even see up here that missing Cylance, and that runs from Automate. That's actually a blended gauge. It will tell us if Cylance isn't running on a machine. So you can get some intelligence, but once again, these were portals that we felt as a team we needed to actually go to the portal and do a manual check daily. Now, obviously, our goal is to automate as much as possible, but our first goal is to take care of our clients and make sure that if there's something wrong, we fix it, and we fix it in the time that we've promised to fix it per our SLA. So it's really important that we do this extra work, which is not really extra work, just an extra step. So how do you make that really easy for a person that's doing that, and how do you centralize that on a certain dashboard? Well, the way we found to do it is build what you can for alerts. So if you can do something that's going to automatically tell you if something's wrong, obviously you want to do that as much as possible. But we actually even put our KBs and our links to the portals here. And now what we say is that these three portals, these three vendor checks, are centralized as a security check. So these are three of our security tools, not all of them, but ones that we needed to do manual checks from. And you can do a lot of things in here, like give good direction. What I always like to tell people is that text gauges are just as good as writing a Word document. So you can bold stuff, you can underline stuff, you can color stuff. There's a lot of potential there. And then just making sure things are running. One of the biggest problems that at least companies that we go in and help, or companies that we take over for because the client wasn't happy with what they were doing, is just not knowing what's going on. So we always like to say knowledge is power here. We like to share this kind of stuff with our clients. And in fact, I've been in client meetings where I'm showing them the same things you are, and I've been in prospect meetings where I'm showing them the same things I'm showing you guys. Because to us, if we're confident on how we're taking care of the client, we don't mind showing it off to the client. Obviously, we're going to get into that a little bit more in some client dashboards. So let's move on to the next one and see what we have. Okay, so earlier I said our backup checks were our second check of the day. This is our first check of the day. Are servers up? Are there any potential errors for servers? Did anything happen overnight? We do not, our shop is not a 24/7 hour monitoring. So what that means obviously is we're working usually 8 to 5. We have lots of stuff automated, but we're not using a separate service. So we come in an hour early before we open and before our hours of operation for our client support is. And we basically just go through the checks and make sure there's nothing crazy. Now you'll notice and look at this and you'll say, oh, there's a lot of yellow, but I don't see, where's all the orange? So I also try to prioritize by priority on the gauges. So this is our criticals, these are our high priorities, and these are all tier ones. And that way, what you can do at times is just take the priority, and as you're working through all the gauges, you're obviously going to be, at least I would assume that most of you are going to be working like you would be reading. So for most of us, that's going to be top down, left to right. So build your gauges so that you're working top down, left or right. It's like what ConnectWise would say, and what I always say when we bring in people or when I'm trying to help with some efficiency, ConnectWise manage. When you're working a ticket, you want to work the ticket top down. You want to set up your pods so that you can see what you need to see, and you want to, minimize the pods you don't need. It's the same idea here, right? Like, make people look at what you need them to look at and don't get their eyes on things that don't matter. So it's one of the reasons why I even like to code the zeros as green, because green means you're good, and it kind of gives you some good feelings if not you're not seeing all sorts of different colors from here. Same thing like I showed you all earlier, we do have this type and subtype split. So our centralized services is the most important type and subtype. We actually have an entire dashboard dedicated to a department report. If anybody's interested in that, I'd be more than happy to share that. Just hit up chat and I'll get your information, but I would have to send it. It's not part of this presentation. But I highly suggest using those so you can look at things like, in the last quarter, how many disk error tickets have we had to make? What percentage of all of our centralized service work, and you can use this for any department, obviously, and we use it for most of ours, what percentage is that? Is there a way to improve the efficiency? Is there a way to script something so maybe it's a shorter step? Once again, just talking about knowledge being power. Some major things we look at here, obviously, if any servers are offline, it's really good. We get a critical ticket going. We contact the client before they open and leave a message. And we usually have somebody scheduled on it that's either fixed before the client started or is in continual working on it so it can get fixed. Obviously, things like storage errors, processor errors, event errors, drive space issue is a real big one, because if drive space is having a problem, Obviously, you guys know how many bad things can happen after that. So you'll kind of notice that these are some classic issues and alerts that you all probably also look out for as well. Um, and and once again, this is not the only things we're doing for servers, just what we have to do as far as manually checking. Now, the other thing I wanted to say is just as far as process goes, just a quick little secret sauce. So what we do is we have a different person doing our centralized service checks than we do remediating those tickets. What we don't want to have, at least in our business, is the same person doing the check, fixing the ticket, and then double checking to make sure the ticket got set to completion and there are no more errors. We like the separation of duty there. So I do the checks, like I said, I make the tickets, and then our dispatcher hands those out to our service team. Our service team will go ahead and work the ticket, but they never ever close the ticket. They put it in a stage that stops SLA that we have just labeled pending gauge. And what that means is the next day I'm going to check for open tickets and close the ones that need to be closed. So when I talked about doing drill downs, my daily check ticket for all the open tickets, I can easily click on this. And one awesome feature that was built in a couple of years ago that if you're not using it, use it right away, is there's a feature where you can connect the ticket number and you can click on the ticket number and it opens the ticket right in ConnectWise. Before that was able to happen with Bright Gauge, we weren't doing the process that exact same way. But now that I can check the gauge and click on the ticket and in a second be right in ConnectWise Manage, right in the ticket, putting in a time entry, closing it out, or putting it in reschedule needed for my staff to get back to work on it has been kind of a dream come true. The one thing you might ask is, wow, Joe, you're a CTO. That's pretty expensive for making tickets and doing that. And that's true. But like most companies, especially right now, a couple of us wear different hats. And I'm very fast and efficient. If you build a good, fast and efficient process, it really shouldn't matter who needs to do it as long as they're in that kind of manager category. And that's my suggestion, is making sure that you have a manager level kind of at least doing a review, if not doing it to the same level I am. All right, let's not get stuck on that. Once again, if there are any questions about some other things we're checking with backups or servers, please go ahead and ask. Next thing we're going to look at is the client dashboard. So a while ago, we were using, and while I say a while ago, I probably mean 4 or 5 years ago, we were using ConnectWise's portal for our clients. No offense to ConnectWise. Anybody that knows me knows how much of a cheerleader I am for ConnectWise. And I don't just say that because I'm on this call. My organization would say I'm really, really, really pro ConnectWise. And I am. And one thing I didn't like is the ConnectWise portal for our clients. So what we did and what BrightGauge lets you do is have the power to build something that you can use yourself. So what we did was we built a client portal, and we now use this for every client, for every type of an agreement. And basically this takes about 3 minutes to make. So it is very short, and it lets clients use some of the same tools you're using, but also gives them a viewpoint. So what we decided when we were talking about what the client dashboard needed to have, we said the first and foremost thing it needed to have is trust. Now, that's kind of a weird thing when you're building a dashboard, is to talk about trust, but what we like to do is we like to present this dashboard as the way you trust network people. So we could go in and during our sales process, we can say, yeah, we're going to do this by SLA, and we're going to do this for you by priority, and this is how many stale tickets you should see, and this is how we work through. I mean, all the stuff all of us do, right? You say the good stuff for the client, but a lot of times after that conversation or once you've onboarded them, your trust starts to go down because you don't have anything to share to prove what you're talking about. So when the client says, hey, you guys are doing a bad job, what are you looking at to say, well, are we? Why don't we look at that together to decide if we're doing a bad job? And I like having conversations with our clients where I don't say yes or no. I say, well, let's look at it together and figure out what's going on. Because at any time you can partner with a client, you're strengthening that relationship. And obviously everybody here knows that. But what's cool is little tweaks or little tools that we use can really make a huge difference with that trust. So one thing we say is, this is data live from our system. We do not and cannot fake this out. So if your resolution time is bad, it's our fault, and it's totally fair and honest. If our resolution time is good, same thing. You can trust it. And there's been a couple skeptical people where I've actually gone and said, do you want to see the back end? Do you want me to show you how that works? And I've showed it to one or two people, and at the end they said, wow, for one, I'm surprised you showed that to me. And I was like, well, you didn't see any client's information. You just saw how I run the system, how I run this portion of our business. And I got to tell you, once you can have a conversation like that with somebody, there's a lot of trust. So let me go over a couple things we thought were important to build that trust relationship. Same thing, like all of our gauges, all of these have drill downs, and these have all been specifically catered to what the client needs in the drill down. So we're going to talk just briefly about drill downs later. It is so important to make sure your drill down, especially if it's client facing, is like your marketing and is very client facing. So keep that in mind. We show open service tickets in general. We show our active IT board, which is really our reactive board, and our net admin board, which is really our proactive board. We like talking to people about the naming structure we use. Just once again, if they can become more familiar with us, our goal is to have them for years and years and years as a client. So why not use the same verbiage? Why not be able to have a conversation with the primary about the same stuff? We'll always show them tickets by type, but we do not show subtype. And there's a very particular reason for that. Subtypes can be really confusing, and you really just start digging into the dirt. We do have a few clients that request some reports with subtypes, and we do quarterly VCIO reports through BrightGauge, both automatically being sent out and through dashboards for the client. So when we do our VCIO meetings, we're actually pulling up this board in the meeting. And this is part, not all by any means, but this is actually part of every VCIO meeting we have with our clients. So we're not just giving this to the client and saying, hey, here, use this. They'll never do that. We're strengthening the idea of using it quarter after quarter with them, but really showing them a split out of types. So one of the things we like to look at it with our clients, and obviously the pie chart looks much different on a full-fledged out client. We like to say, do you feel this spread? And what we really mean there is, if the spread looks good to us and it just says they have a balanced level of workstation issues and maybe slowness or here and there, we want to know if that's how the client feels. And once we start doing that, like, hey, it looks like about 20% of the things you guys are calling in are workstation slowness. Do you want to talk about getting those new workstations today? I mean, you can go into stuff like that automatically because you're pointing it out, but you're not getting in the nitty gritty. So that's a really great piece of advice for everyone out there. Another thing we like to do is show a combined SLA. This can save your butt. If one of your priorities is a little weak a quarter, or you just had a really bad ticket, or as everybody knows, if you had an engineer that didn't change the status in the right place and you didn't want to fake it out, we don't fake those things out. So if somebody kept something in progress, as an example, for 3 days, that SLA would look really terrible on that ticket, and we would have to do some training. But we're not going to change or fake anything out. We're just going to explain it. So either way, you have a combination and you can drill down in that. And then we have a split out where you can see the priorities. So this client might say, okay, Joe, your average time to closing out my tickets is just over 10 hours. That's not very good. And I'd say, no, it's not. As a general rule, as an average, though, it is pretty good, don't you think? Let's look at specifics. Okay, your criticals only took us an hour. Your high priorities took us a little long at 8. And your tier ones were 17. How do you feel about that split? Per our SLA, that would be really good. That's almost like double the numbers of SLA. So it'll really help as you talk about those type of issues with your clients. Some other things that we see on the client dashboard that we always want to show, with the same idea of, if it's in our system, you can see it, is if there's a critical ticket in the system. So what I always tell them is, if you look at your dashboard and you don't see a critical ticket and you feel like there's a critical issue going on, you should call us. You should really call us and say, hey, what is going on? Because I feel like there's a critical issue. Now, a lot of the times it's a high priority ticket. but that's why we show them that those above gauges. So after the first or second time working with your client, there's usually not any questions on that. Another thing we show is stale tickets. What I like to tell people is if they see a stale ticket, they're allowed to yell at me the next time they see me. I appreciate them not yelling, but they're totally allowed. And one of the reasons we use this one, because we did have a stale ticket for this client, and we actually talked to them about it. So, you know, your organization might say 3 days old, and when we say 3 days old, we mean nothing happening for 3 days. No notes were put on it, nothing save and close, right? So 3 days is unacceptable. We have a dispatcher that looks at stuff and reschedules it, keeps it going. Obviously, we were waiting on our client for more than 3 days, but we didn't call them again the 4th day. So my question to my dispatcher was like, hey, it's showing that we're being stale when we're really just waiting for this client. Can you give them another call today? And they're like, yeah, of course, that makes total sense. So it's just good to show the client that and know how we're working with them to make sure we're not sitting on any of their stuff or we're hiding any of their issues, right? CSAT comment board. My favorite thing is if you can, and we use Smile Back, but if you can integrate your CSAT for your clients so that you can walk in with your primaries and you can go, hey, you're not going to be able to talk to all your employees about how network people is doing. We know that, you know that, but we want you to know how everybody at your organization feels about our company. Obviously, you need to know that. You need to know if you want to keep paying us. You need to know if there's any problems. You need to know if your staff is having any issues that they're not telling you about. Well, one thing I like to tell them is check your comment board every once in a while. So we strongly encourage people use our customer satisfaction responses that we have built in ConnectWise Manage on our completed email status, as I'm sure most of you have. If not, that is a great thing to ask ConnectWise about. You should absolutely be driving CSAT through those tickets and that ticket completion. But we have a lot of clients that really love this feature and will use this. And what we'll do, same thing, when we go into those VCIO meetings every quarter, we'll say, let's see what your team thinks about us, or let's see what they thought about us this quarter. And we can pull that up. We can show history of those with reporting. There's just a lot of cool stuff that you can do. And then, man, does it feel good to know that your primary feels comfortable with how you're working, and they can also see the kind of feedback you're using. The other really important piece that we have set up and built to work with that is that if we ever get anything but a positive response, it automatically creates a ticket, and we have our service manager call that client within 24 hours. And really, it's within 8 hours, same business day when I say that. So if it gets put in on Monday, before the end of Tuesday, they will receive a call. If it is a red or a big frowny face instead of that yellow, kind of neutral face, we try to call same day. So that's some of the ways you can work together with your clients on some of these client dashboards. And here is actually just a little bit more information on that CSAT score and reaction. So we actually do show the overall score and the overall reactions. We also started showing contact inventory. So any contacts that they have in the ConnectWise system will show. And then we also obviously have server inventory and workstation inventory. Our gauges use both ConnectWise config data and our automate data as well. So won't go over too much, but let me tell you, the clients really, really like just to see this information so they see what they're paying for. If you're a device-based agreement model, and then if you're a user-based agreement model, obviously keeping those users in here and making sure you're using things like status to delineate paid for users and maybe out of scope users is really important as well.
Hey, Joe, before we
Yeah.
progress to the next section, I've got a couple questions that have come in for you and a couple more that I will leave to the end. But one of them is for your client dashboards, what time frame are you using for your data? 30 days, 90 days?
So we're doing, that's a great question. So everything on the live dashboard is the last 90 days. And then we actually cloned that dashboard into a report. and that was previous quarter. So what we can do is when we go into our VCIO meetings, the report that has been sent to the client is for the previous quarter. And then when we go in, we can look at their live dashboard for that current quarter. So yeah, live dashboard is current quarter, and then reporting shows the quarter before it, so you can always compare and contrast.
Oh, that's awesome. Let's see. So the next one that I wanted to ask now rather than later is, how do you handle your hours of operation since you're not a 24/7 shop?
Sure. So our hours of operation, we do 7 to 5. We do after hours support. So we will take tickets to up to midnight and then start tickets as early as 5 or 6 a.m. But you can't just call in for that. So there are some requirements there. So most of the time you can get a hold of us. But that's what, since, you know, we have Automate running, and once again, we have a ton of automation and things going on. We're just not monitoring, which is why we need to start those manual checks that I'm doing before the clients get into work, which is why I start at 6 a.m.
All right, and then one more question, and then we can move on and take more questions at the end. So how, or no, do you need to create individual gauges for each client?
No, so what's really cool, and that's a great question, and that goes into some of these design tips we'll be getting into, but here's what I do. I have that dashboard I showed you. I have one of the dashboards called Client Dashboard Template. And what I do every time we get a new client, and that template is a dashboard that looks just like what I showed y'all, but it doesn't have any filtering on it. And what I do is I take that dashboard and I clone it or copy it. And once you copy the dashboard, it gives you a choice to rename it. You rename it, and then you put your client's name on it. And then all you have to do is set up the filtering. So like for me, since I know there are 5 filtering categories you have to fill out, one is company and one is location name. Those are the 2 that hold between the 5 different data sets we use in it. So you just keep on cloning that template dashboard, and then it builds out. And like I said, besides for inviting the person, I mean, that cloning and setting up the filter can probably be done in legit like 2 minutes.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, let's get into the design stuff. I'm really excited to bring this. We haven't done this in a webinar before, but it's definitely much needed and applies across the board.
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, this is one of my favorite things to talk about when we are talking about bright gauges is design tips, because it's a lot. And I won't take too long, but I did want to just share the story before we go into this. I started off as a very non kind of code, what I would say as a non-coder. So when I started working with Bright Gauge, and at the same time I was trying to work with the custom dashboards within ConnectWise Manage that existed back then, custom reporting, all that kind of stuff. And for me, and at that point in time, I was a service manager, I had so much other stuff going on. I didn't feel like there was going to be any way I was going to be able to do this. I thought I was going to have to learn coding. I had some other experiences with some other platforms where it's just like, oh my gosh, there's so much to know. And at least with Bright Gauge, what I can say is I was just shocked at how fast I was able to get up and going with it, how easy they make it, and how good their support has been. So I strongly encourage everybody out there, if you think it's just too much, or if there's anybody out there thinking like, oh man, I really need to learn a lot more before I start using or implementing some stuff, don't feel that way. Feel like you have the power to kind of make the tools, and really, if you know what you want to do with it, which is the hardest part, right? But if you know what you want to do with the tool, I can guarantee you can probably pull it off. So like I said, I won't spend too much time, but I went within probably 2 weeks of being really nervous and, you know, going to my owner saying, I don't know how much I'm going to be able to get done, to really just getting a ton done and learning a lot in the process. So very first thing going from that is making sure your data sources are set up correctly. and making sure you work through any problems. Now, we use a lot of different data sources. We use some manual data sources where you actually, so Dropbox is a good example where you have to build in some tables and some intelligence from the data source level. And you just want to make sure all of that's good. If you get any errors, you just want to contact support. So obviously you're here, contact support at Brightgauge if something doesn't look right. Also, knowing what data sources you're using and knowing what you want to use in the future is really important. So a really short story I can use there is we're trying to do more financials through dashboarding and through Brightgauge, and we are a QuickBooks shop and we don't have QuickBooks as a data source. So every time my owner has said like, hey, can we get some stuff going or some better reporting going? I keep on saying, yeah, we just need to add a data source into Brightgauge and then I'll be able to do some really cool stuff. So once again, make sure that what you are paying for in Brightgauge is what you want and what you need. Just make sure that's set up right. I don't have anything else on data source. Danielle, do you?
No, just to highlight again that our team is ready and willing to work with you if something isn't coming in correctly. Same with adding new data sources too. If there's anything you want to try out, just email sales@brightgauge.com and we'll set you up with a trial of it. We're really just happy to chat with you and figure out the best package that works for you.
Yeah, and one thing that's really great is a lot of times I think people think that if they get a new data source, they have to start from ground zero. On every data source I've imported, there's already some gauges, some reporting, something that gets you started. So as you guys are talking to ConnectWise about adding data sources, make sure not to forget to ask what comes canned with that data source, because you might get some of what you're looking to build from you, like right from the get-go, which is great. All right, let's see what we got next here. So using the correct data set, so going down the line, obviously, using the right data sets are important, and we pulled a really good example of why. And these are things that no matter how long you use Brightgauge, you need to think about when you're designing. And I will be honest, you need to constantly think about how things are designed as your business changes, so you make sure that if you need to do any redesigns. So at one point in time, we had some gauges set up with Ticket Stat Lite, and we were using them, and we had a meeting the other day and we pulled up a dashboard we hadn't used in a while that they want me to redesign and rebuild that shows some KPI stuff, and it's really more of an internal management dashboard. We started looking at the numbers and we said, this looks weird. What is going on here? This says quarter to date and it's like pretty far in the quarter, but these like numbers seem really low. So what was it? It was the darn data set. So I went in there and I was like, oh guys, we're using Stats Lite. And they said, what does that mean? I said, guys, well, it's the data set we're using. It's pulling in different data. And they said, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, okay. So different data sets pull in different information based on a certain range, a date range. And this is one of the most common reasons you will have wrong information on a gauge is you're using the wrong data set. So if you only need 14 days of data and you never need more than that, Ticket Stat Lite is perfect. It's great. And why is because it's a faster loading. It doesn't bring in so much. It actually gives you more options than the stat. At least last time I checked, there's a couple more things you can do with it. But if you're trying to do quarter to date reports, obviously that's not going to work and it's going to skew stuff. And there is nothing in Brightgauge that's going to tell you, hey, you're trying to pull a quarter's worth of information and your data set's only set up to do the last 14 days. Stop being so silly. You have to check that stuff. When you're designing it, you have to know that. So the data set details section is so important because it'll give you that description. It'll tell you the sync. It'll tell you seek frequency, excuse me, and the data source all in that one pane. So I encourage everybody to use that. And when you bring in a new data source, make sure you understand the different data sets and make sure that data source and data set means something completely different to you, because they are going to be completely different to you going forward. Anything to add on that one?
Yes, so since you've joined, Joe, we've changed some things with the naming of these data sets. So we found stats late to be a little confusing. So those who have joined past, I don't know when, 2016, 2017, it's now labeled as with the date range of what that data is. I also want to note that generally the naming for the data set matches the location of that information back in your other system. So you look at ConnectWise, your agreements data, your time entries, it all shows up relative to, or is labeled relative to how it shows up back in your ConnectWise, your manage.
That's great. That's great. All right, let's see what we got next. How are we doing on time? Oh, not too bad. So this is a really good one. This has saved butts before for sure. So one of the things you need to, this is my most critical tip, make sure you are checking the usage of the gauges before making any changes. If you're doing something in Bright Gauge, what you want to do is build a gauge that you can use on multiple dashboards, or else you're going to be spending way too much time. Because if you want to change that gauge, so you'll notice that this is my employee boards here for our internal. And what I want to be able to do is to go into any of those boards and make a change on the gauge, and it affect all of those dashboards, right? So if I made a separate gauge for Will for an alert, and a separate gauge for Hunt for the same alert, and for Andre, so on and so forth, I would then have to go in and edit all of those individually instead of editing one. This goes back to the client dashboard. So if I wanted to change the SLA gauge that was on the client dashboards, I just have to change it on one. I mean, I would never be able to make any changes if I had to go into 60 independent dashboards, right? So make sure you're seeing what you're using these gauges for, and make sure before you make any changes, especially major changes, but even minor changes, it just takes a second to click on the usage tab, click on that tab, and kind of get a look around. Just make sure you feel safe about those changes. That's what I have on this one. Anything from you?
No, this one's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. All right, cool. But important, right? And then, yeah, your filters are already in place. So building reports from dashboards is like easy stuff 101. If you want to look good for the people you work with and your bosses and your clients, and they say, oh man, I need a report on this, I know we look at this information, say, hey, no problem, I'll build it in Bright Gauge for you. Is it okay if it looks like the dashboard? Oh yeah, that's fine, no problem. Just convert it. It'll be so fast and so impressive. That does rely on the dashboards being built correctly, which is why I am so very serious about some of that data set, data source building procedure. But once you are confident that everything's built right, converting to reports is just such a blessing for your entire organization. It's pretty simple. It's just that simple, but you can know that if you convert to report, you can still edit that report, and you're not locked into how the gauge is set up, how the dashboard's set up. And at that point in time, you can even add to the report as well. So that's what I would say is the important thing to know there. Danielle, you wanted to mention anything?
Well, we did have one person write in asking if you share both reports and dashboards. And I know that you said you do the previous quarter, you sent out a report, and for everything current, you have a dashboard.
Yeah, so and there's obviously we were only scratching the surface. We have, I think, not counting the client dashboards, which is obviously going to make the number, but I still think we have over 60 dashboards in our system that we use, probably 40 of them continuously. So what I do is anything that wants to be an automated report. So Oh, let me think of a good example. We have a service meeting with our service team every Tuesday. So one thing that irks me a little bit is when people don't show up to meetings with knowledgeable material, right? Knowing what's been going on. So we said, our service manager and I got together and we said, well, wouldn't it be cool if on Monday we automatically sent a report to where it didn't cost us any time to all of the service team to their email and just say, hey guys, if you have time, maybe take a review before our meeting tomorrow so you can bring some stuff or any issues you're having. And the difference it made in those meetings was instantaneous and pretty important. We had a couple people even, hitting up chat and teams like, oh wow, I just reviewed our SLA for last week. Great job, guys. Our dispatcher was able to send out some messages. Our service manager was able to actually send out in our huddles some good jobs to people because he was reviewing CSAT. So once again, it really depends on your process and how you want to show stuff. But I think it's always a great idea, once again, to automate what you can, and getting information to either internal or external is so powerful. So why not set up automated reports to do that kind of work for you, is my thought.
I'm with you on that. Automate as much as possible. Remove the minutia where you can. Makes sense.
Yep. Let's see what we got next. I think this might be our last one. But use text boxes. Obviously, I talked about this earlier, but we really did want to make a separate slide for it because there is not a dashboard that I fully use that doesn't have a text box gauge on it. The only thing that we have to sometimes work with is just resizing it. So just know that you want to make sure that all text is visible. I feel like if people have to scroll down and it's not clear that you have to scroll down. So the example we have on the right here, this review data cloud continuity portal, and then the review shadow control portal, you can easily see that you have to scroll down in that. But I do have a few of these where I've actually spread them out wider so there are no scrolling. If this one wasn't such a big one, I do encourage you guys to not cause as much scrolling as possible in those gauges. Were there any questions on the text box gauges or anything like that from our team here?
Well, we had one that came in earlier on just how to set it up, and I sent out a screenshot showing where the text modules are located. These aren't things that we save, so they're specific to each time you go and fill them out. So if there's anything that you want to see there, you might want to keep a running inventory outside of BrightGauge where you can quickly copy and paste from.
That's a great idea. It's a great idea. Well, okay. We did have one more. Two more?
Yeah, I think we do have just two more.
All right. Well, I will try to go through them. Modified drill downs for your clients. So we talked about this a lot. Don't send them to a portal they can't access is another great mention. One thing, depending on your experience in BrightGauge, you'll know that once you select data to put on the drill down, it will come in on the database naming structure. So it will never look, in my opinion, client presentable. And you can see in these examples that we've actually changed the name. So board name, date entered, status, summary, even if it's just small tweaks. Once again, to me, this is marketing. And that's both internal and external. I know people that work with BrightGauge that say like, oh, I'm not going to spend time to edit that. That's ridiculous. And I say, well, isn't that telling your people or your clients like what information it is and how they're looking at it? And usually I get like well, yeah, that part's true, I guess. So spend the extra time. Also, what you can do is build good. So let's say you're building 10 different gauges. You could build a drill down in the first gauge you build that's going to be a global drill down. And then you just copy or replicate that gauge as you're building other gauges, and that drill down stays in there. So maybe, so like some of our client dashboard gauges have the same drill down information. So when I was building them, I would build one, I would make sure the drill down was nice. I would make sure even if I wanted to color code some stuff or whatever, it was done. And then I would just save that one, and then I would copy, you know how you guys can save or save as a new gauge? I would, even if you have to change the data set, that trick works. So really think about what your drill down should be, because that is one thing that does take more time than I would like to spend, is going back in and changing drill downs or adjusting drill downs per gauge because they're gauge specific. So just be aware of that. But always modify them so you're explaining. And then a couple things I've even done, and on this one you can't tell, so I'm not too worried about it. But on some, I've even requested from BrightGauge of like, hey, this date entered is actually pulling in the time, and I don't want the time. I just want the date entered. So I even have some DB sets where I can just put in the date entered and it says no time. So I even have an option at that point in time. And that's how we think about it. We want to think about exactly what's the best thing that the client wants to see. The reason we did put the time is we want to show the client when we completed the ticket. So if they call at, say, 5 o'clock, or maybe that wouldn't happen, 4:55 p.m., and they said, hey, why is my ticket still open? If it's been closed at 4:50, I can say, oh, it got closed at 4:50. You just probably didn't see it yet. Oh, okay, Joe, cool, thanks. So some of those things are really good idea. Once again, if you train them on what these things are, and depending on your client, they might not even know what an SLA means. Like, we really try to not teach as, hey, you don't know this, you should know this, but here's how we work together. And modifying the drill downs are some of the most powerful things that your internal staff are going to use and your clients are going to use at the same time. So think of it as marketing and always make sure they make sense.
All right, we have actually 3 more slides, so I want to go through them pretty quickly because we're at time here. Make sure that we can answer a couple questions at the end. So with this next slide, the presentable columns, this ties not only to what's partner facing, what's client facing, but what also shows up at the drill down level. So you can change these to match, to just clean them up, look a little bit better than the fields that we pull in automatically. And again, you can do this at what's forward facing, and then once they drill down, what shows up there too. Let's see, and then the next slide that we have, if you click to that, Joe, the playlist. So the big tip on this one is just if you ever want to be able to pull up a screen pretty quickly in dark mode, a dashboard that you have, you can always add /TV to the end of any URL. This is a good quick hack that we use when we're looking on it at our dashboards on a separate monitor. And it will bring it up in this. It also triggers it to go into a playlist if you'd like for it to. And then lastly, we have this just so for those who are concerned about seeing zeros all over the place, you can always replace those in the threshold section in the design editor. So in this case, we're replacing 0 with there's nothing left. There's no more free space. You can get creative with this. Another thing that's not showing here is that you can also do this with text too, specifically that shows up at that level. So if I wanted to highlight everything that says Iceberg Incorporated at the client level, I can create a threshold based on that too. And the last one, this is a great tip from Joe. I won't get in the way of you sharing this one.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah, so set a process, create tasks or tickets, and set a reminder to audit info. So we have checks in place, as I explained earlier, so I won't take too much time in that, but I have a quarterly check for different dashboard data sets. Basically, what we want to do is we want to leverage all of our platforms to work together as much as possible. So leveraging our KBs, you'll notice in this example that we actually have some KBs stacked right here in the new notes section of the ticket. These automatically come in as well. So, you know, we make enough tickets throughout the day that anything we can have as a ticket template, and just, you know, if it doesn't show up on somebody's schedule, it's probably not going to happen. So the fact that we can start our days, and then even if I'm going to be out, like as an example, I can then move those tickets to another resource so easily. It's just a really good idea to create a process from start to finish to do some of these things, and then working through your platforms to do that.
I think this is one of the biggest tips out of the whole presentation. Is it's one thing to look at the numbers, but if you don't have a process behind it to check that information, make it actionable, then yeah, you're really only as good as the data that's coming in that you're putting in, and also the process in place to make sure that everything's accurate and timely and effective.
Yeah, and you know, another thing that's a part of all of our culture right now is trying to find ways to be more efficient and ways to automate things, and it's really hard to do that when I can't tell my owners and have good meetings looking at how long it is taking to do these things. So what's nice is, you know, we could have been kind of, in my opinion, lazy and built one ticket to do all of our centralized service checks every day, but we have 7 tickets because we divide them out the same way we divide out type and subtype, so that if we want to use something like Bright Gauge to quickly show where we're spending time and where we might need to cut time from, or how we can be more efficient, it sure is great when enough things are set up that when your owner asks, hey, why are we spending this time here? You can go, I don't know, let's look. Okay, here's where it is, here's why. That was pretty fast, right? And you have better meetings, you have better conversations with real data that you can trust. And that goes for the client dashboards, that goes for our internal meetings. As you guys know, if you don't trust data, you're just talking about how things feel, not how things are. And what the entire industry and pretty much every industry needs to do, right, is make sure we know what is actually going on, not what we think is going on, and respond to that factual information. That's the best thing that Bright Gauge, especially in tandem with a ConnectWise managed platform, can do, for sure.
Awesome. Well, with that, I'd say that just the last slide that we have here, it doesn't stop, folks. Always
One last
to add in. So we have a couple questions. I know that we're over time. But Joe, I just wanted to leave that for all those who are on. We'll still include this Q&A in the recording. So if you want to check back, you have to jump off to something else. No problem. We want to make sure that you're covered. So feel free to stick around or hop off, whatever works for you. So with this one question that we have here, it's on stale tickets. Do you track that by time entry or by ticket status?
By ticket status and ticket age. So when you save a ticket in the system, it actually shows and refreshes it. There's a couple different ways you can do that, but we leverage the was it saved and closed and the age and the status, those 3 things combined. Also, if anybody needs to see like back end of how the data sets are set up, or if there's a certain gauge you wanted to see, like what data set we used or what data source or how the back end of that gauge looked, please let us know. And I think we'd be happy to share that and some best practices for some gauges for everybody out there.
That would be a great follow-up. Let's see, the next question here is, which statuses do you use for the response time SLA?
So As far as response time SLA, so we do the 3 stages, your classic 3 stages there. So response, obviously, we use assigned or anything above assigned. So our policy is to put every ticket in as a new ticket. So it goes in starting the clock when our engineer or dispatcher or manager or owner, whoever it is in the company, if they make that ticket, they're going to save it as a new ticket, and then they're going to do whatever they need to do on it. So time starts running. One of the reasons we do that is because we like to tell people that when we know of an issue, we start the clock on the issue. We don't write it down on a post-it note and then make a ticket at the end of the day before we clock out, so it looks like 8 hours went by, but nothing runs on the SLA. I think our total stack is about 18 statuses long. We have a few that do internal notifications that our team can leverage and use if they need help, they need to escalate a ticket. But as far as just moving it from stage 1 to stage 2, it usually all tickets go into assigned, scheduled, or in progress directly from new ticket.
Awesome. Yeah, we tend to see that across some of the other accounts that we work with. They generally fall within that range too. Maybe just some fun naming conventions that get added in, but yeah, it follows that normally.
Yeah.
And the last question that we have here is, how do you track ticket progression through escalation statuses and handoffs to seniors?
Sure. So we are a little different. One of the things that we're continuing to work on is making a better escalation path. But what we do is we use statuses to drive that, and we have a superstar. I mean, we have a superstar team, but our dispatcher, and I've gone to other companies, our dispatcher is insane with what he can handle. So what the status will do is the status will let our dispatcher know that somebody's been on a ticket for more than 20 minutes and they need help. What we want to do for the team is to make sure they feel good about putting it in that status, and then they can just move on to their next ticket, and they don't have to kind of feel down or anything like that. It's just acceptable. And then what'll happen is that dispatcher will reach out either to our service manager if he feels like we need to do training or bust it out really quick. If he feels like he can just reschedule it with a higher level resource at the next availability and it won't miss SLA, our dispatcher at that point in time does that. And we didn't show it off today, but obviously we use a dispatch dashboard pretty often to where he can go in and just quickly jump into tickets, jump into things, and also get alerts himself for things like stale tickets and those things that can show on the client board as a negative to network people.
All right, I don't see any more questions coming in. But if you'd like, you can always follow up to any of the emails that we've sent regarding the series if you have any questions. We also have an end of webinar survey. It's 1-2 questions, just allowing you to add in what you'd like to see next, as well as you can also write in anything that you wanted to learn more about. We'll do our best to follow up and provide some value where we can.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been beyond valuable, and hopefully we can get you on for another one of these soon.
Absolutely. And like I said, this starting as a service manager and really going to what I'm trying to do now for our organization, I just cannot imagine doing it without BrightGauge, without the data. It's really comforting. So if anybody's stressed out there, and if anybody's trying to figure out how to show what needs to get done, implement BrightGauge, implement the right things, and I guarantee it will make your business life better and make your meetings and decision processes better, most importantly.
I love to hear that. Yeah, we're here to help out where we can. Your success team, your sales, your support team, utilize the resources available to you, and we'll help fill in the gaps wherever any knowledge on something might be missing. And With that, I hope to see you at the end of this month's mastermind chat and here for another user showcase webinar next month. All right, thanks again, Joe. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.